So this morning, I'm coming to you live from where I grew up in Mississippi. I came home to help my mom for a few days with some things around the house, and it's something that you have to do sometimes when you're oldest, to take care of your family. But this morning we're going to be talking about family and after the military. It's a transition for me. It was a transition, still is, because of the fact that I spent 20 years in the military and I had two different families. I divorced my first wife. We divorced in 2000, and I remarried in 2003. So I had a whole new family, and we had one son out of that one. We had no kids out of the first one, but it's the part of transitioning, because especially with me in my last 8 years in the military, I spent 4 years of it gone, to Iraq and Afghanistan. So it was quite a transition to not be leaving, going somewhere every time I turned around. And for me, the biggest thing was my son wondering when I walked out the door whether or not I was coming back. And of course, I got to the point where I would tell him exactly where I'm going, when I would be back, and all that, just to reassure him. As I did that over time, he finally got to the point where he didn't worry about it anymore, because Daddy wasn't going anywhere for a long time. And so we had to make adjustments into where I would fit into the family, as far as what I would do and what role I would play and all of that, with the, the chores, best way to say it, around the house. So, I took care of the yard, took out the trash, cooked some, because I'm cooked, so, I know how to do that. And, basically would take care of my son whenever my wife would have something else to do. So, we bonded with going to water parks and stuff like that. And, that was a real special time for me, knowing I wasn't taking him back home, and in 2 months I'd be leaving again, And then of course you're making all the adjustments around that with your work and with your what you like to do. I like to go fish, so stuff like that. Always make sure that you're not going at such a speed that you're going to neglect yourself, because neglecting yourself is just going to push the thing different, And so when you are doing things, make sure that somewhere in there in your mind you got to say, okay, hey, on Friday I'm going to take a couple hours and go do what I want to do. Like I said, I go fish. So it's a challenge, because of all the problems that you probably had in the military, with being married, being separated, and all that. And so you're really trying to rebuild a whole new relationship, because now you are together, you are doing things together, you are in the same house for ever on a day, and stuff like that. And sometimes I would take a look at my family, and it was like I was almost looking at somebody else's family, because I didn't know my own family. And that's a common thing that happens, especially in deployments, because of the fact that you are not really involved in the day-to-day. You get the Skypes and the emails and Facebook and all that when you're deployed, but it doesn't make up for the actual being home. Some of the choices that you're going to have to make is, hey, your buddy calls you up, say, hey, we got a hunting trip this weekend. we're gonna go hunting, wherever, hunting lodge and stuff. Just so happens it's the weekend of your son's championship football game at school, and you have missed so many of those events that, you realize that you have to make a decision, and believe me, your friends will forgive you. Your son, on the other hand, is probably gonna take a step back out of the relationship because of that choice. I'm not saying that you have to, but I'm just saying that the better choice would be to take that decision of your son, because you're only going to get this thing one time around. You don't get a second chance at it. You don't get another. He's not going to be 6 years old next year. You don't get another time. You have to realize that the time in front of you is what you have and nothing else. So you have to go to a championship football game. That will help your relationship with your son, because he sees the commitment that you're willing to make. The same thing with your wife. If she wants to do something that you really don't want to do, like my wife loves to go garage selling, I don't, but you have to understand that those are important. So once again, if your buddies want to go do something, but your wife has said, hey honey, I want to go garage selling, that means she wants you to go with her, then you need to go with her. And so that's the thing with, the marriage, where you got to start making choices that are toward your family. Don't neglect yourself, but just kind of plan. And, you just say, hey, the weekend of the 28th, I got this, so I'm going to be busy. And as you can get into a routine with a calendar and thing, I keep it on my phone. Paper calendars really just end up getting trashed, but you have to make those plans, because one, you aren't going anywhere, so you can lock them plans in, and two, it'll show that commitment to your son or whoever, that you're putting stuff in your phone calendar wise and stuff, and say, here, we got it down, and that kind of locks that into his mind that you're gonna commit to that. Like we went to Slitterbonds this past July, and had fun down there, and I've always wanted to go to Slitterbonds, just never had a chance, so now I've been to Slitterbonds, and the thing about it is, that helps so much more when you're out there with your son, and you get things done, and you talk about things, and my son will talk about some of the weirdest stuff, like water in his shoe. No joke, son, you got water in your shoe because you're in the pool. But he thinks that's fascinating, so guess what? I think that's fascinating. A lot of people will want to do marriage counseling, and that will be all up to you, because of the fact that you have to find people that can understand the military marriage. The military marriage is a very, very delicate creature. It's not the normal military marriage. It's not the normal marriage by anything. People don't get separated for a year at a time. People don't go to work and jump on an aircraft and can't tell their wife where they're going because it's secret. I laugh at people who were separated for 2 weeks from their husband because of a business trip. Like 2 weeks, that's a walk in the park. But you have to find, it's like therapy. Finding a therapist that can relate to a veteran. That's important. And same thing with marriage counseling. Marriage counseling will only be as successful as the three of y'all, the therapist and the husband and wife. If you don't allow that relationship with the therapist to develop, and you just shut it out of 1 or 2 times, then you may have missed the person that can help you. Because it's different. That's why whenever I talk to somebody and I ask about that therapist, I want to know what their background is, as far as, and then I want to know how how the therapist treats you. Does the therapist look at you and talk to you and all of that stuff, or does the therapist kind of just write notes and look up every once in a while and say, so how does that make you feel, you know? And you know, I won't say that I wanted to take that notebook and throw it across the room, but you know, sometimes I want to say, hey, pay attention to me and not your notebook. You know, like I said, with the family, there's so many dynamics that are in there, and it all will depend on where you're in your relationship. If you're only in like 4 years, let's say you got married right before you got before he joined or she joined, you know, you were into the new thing anyway, so you have less work to do, you know. But if you were in for 20 and you're married for 10, then you got set in a lot of ways, and so now you got to reset things and you got to reframe things to where things are going to work out. And don't think that just cause you're no longer in the military that you don't carry the same stuff outside the marriage, because you do, you know. And a lot of times people don't see the change that you make or that you're making until years later, because they're not looking for it. You know, if they were looking for it, they would see it right away. My wife didn't see changes in me until years later. You know, I've been out for 9 years. This come August 31st, you know, so here in about 3 weeks I'll hit my 9-year mark, you know. And in the last 2 years she's noticed change when I've been changing for 6 years, you know. And it's a matter of what she wants changed versus what you won't change. No, it still comes down to you, because you're the one making change in the relationship. Don't try to change for her. Change for you. Okay? You do not ever try to change yourself into somebody for somebody else, because you'll never get there. Okay? Expectation, disappointment, sadness, anger, all of those emotions will come into play, and things will just go down a shithole in a heartbeat. So you got to realize that you cannot change things for somebody else, and you can't change that person. You can't change that person. You can't change that person. Okay, I said it 3 times. I probably said a dozen more, but I don't feel like doing that. You know, you can't change that person. Okay, you have to realize that. You may see a change they need to make, but you got to realize that that may be a change you want them to make for you, to make it easier for you. It's not about that. It's about what they need to change for themselves and stuff like that. You know, change is always an ongoing circumventing thing that you flow through in life. You know, sometimes you hit change and it's easy, and sometimes you hit change and it'll knock you on your ass. You know, but you get back up and you keep going. You know, it's just like, I know that what my dad did when he was alive in fixing things is not the way I do it. My mom gets upset at me about not doing it the way Dad. Unfortunately, I did not have the privilege of spending every day with my dad, you know, watching him work, you know, and figuring out things the way his mind worked, because his mind works different. His mind worked different than my mind worked, you know. And that's another thing. You know, my wife is passive aggressive. I am assertive, sometimes aggressive. You know, those two things have to gel somewhere in the middle, you know, and you have to learn those behaviors. You know, somebody asked me, like, you've been married 10 years, you just got out of the military, why do you got to relearn your wife? Because whatever changes she went through in those 10 years and I didn't pick up on, then I need to do. Plus, I need to get back into that relationship aspect of it and say, okay, she's doing passive aggressive. She's trying to get her to feel sorry for me. I mean, for me to feel sorry for her because she had to cut the grass because I wasn't fast enough on it or something like that. You just got to realize that it's not always about you, and it's about her. You know, most of the time people complain about things or whatever. It's about what they didn't do, not what you didn't do. But they're gonna flip that thing around to where it's gonna look like you did it, you know. And that's a strange human instinct for us to respond to being criticized when they're actually criticizing themselves for something else totally unrelated that had nothing to do with whatever was going on between y'all two. Okay, so you know, with marriage, military, after military, it's just an ongoing cycle that will spin direction that you want it to spin, and then sometimes it'll spin right back on you. Just keep moving forward. You know, I will be honest with you. 2 years ago, I felt like that I was all alone in my marriage, and that I thought my marriage is over, and now I rethink that. I told my wife, and she asked me about 6 months ago, I said things are changing. Meaning that I see there's hope where hope wasn't before. You know, so it's always an ongoing decision, ongoing process that you have to decide if this is what you want to do. You know, remember, it's not about you, it's about the other person. You know, you have to realize that what you want and what they want is two different things, and somewhere in the middle, you got to come to that agreement. Like I said, you know, growing up here in the country, I have a different thought process than some people have because of the fact of how I grew up. Drinking out of garden water hose, you know, or picking stuff off the ground after I dropped it to eat it or whatever, you know. But some of that has changed because of the fact that I hadn't lived here in a long time. You know, so things change constantly, and just remember that you can be a part of that change or you can't. If you sit on the sidelines and you watch the game and you never get involved, don't complain about it, okay? You're not in the game, you don't get to have a say, so you have to keep quiet. You know, if you are in the game and you're doing things, then you can say, hey, I want to change this because I see it out here and I think it will work better. If it works better, great. If it don't, that's wonderful. Then you figure it out, okay, that don't work, let's do this. You know, always have a plan A, B, C, D, and F. You know, if you find something in that A, B, C, D, and F that works, use it. You know, if you see something else somebody else has used, use it. You know, nobody has a monopoly on anything that they have tried and worked. You know, I try to share with people that, you know, put stuff on Facebook or whatever. I try to share with my page so that they can glean information from that. You know, it's like when I first started this back in last year, I said I want to give away what I got. That means my information, my time, my talents, my experience. It's going to say advice, but I don't give away advice because advice is just like everything else. People have it. It's some good and some bad. So what I want you to do is just work on your marriage the same way you work on anything else. Be dedicated to it. Have the goal in mind that you're going to make this work, and make sure that you're including your kids in everyday activities so they feel a part of the family, especially in the first few months you're out from the military, so that they will know that dad's committed, dad or mom is committed to me now. I'm not sharing him with the Army anymore, or her with the Navy, or him with the Marines, or whatever, you know. It's now a dedication thing to the family. You know, we've always been dedicated to family. We just had two families be dedicated to, military and our own. So y'all take care, and I'll be back in Texas next week after I leave here on Wednesday. And it's a good day. Y'all have a great time, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.